Hi, welcome to this little video where I'll be showing my latest project. This is a virtual reality sculpt that was made with Kodon VR. The texturing was done in Substance Painter, and the final composition, lighting and renders were set up in Blender 3D. This is actually the first time that I've recorded and edited a video like this, so I honestly don't really know what I'm doing as far as that goes. But I'm hoping that getting a look at the pipeline that I've set up while working on this project proves useful to someone out there. So let's get started and jump into VR with Kodon. Here I'm starting out with the cube brush, which is great for the jagged metal type of look that I want for the throne. You can see the concept piece that I made on the right hand side every now and then. I'll show what I'm doing in real time for a little bit here and there, but this will mostly be a time-lapse type video. I ended up cutting down about 10 hours of footage into this 20 minutes video, so yeah, vroom. Har. And anyway, first I'm blocking out the silhouette of the throne here. By the way, I have to say that I absolutely love working like this in VR. I've never really gotten into sculpting before. I mean, I've done it here and there, but I never really gotten comfortable with sculpting through a flat monitor. It just lacks that intuitive understanding of what is happening in three-dimensional space, which sort of comes for free as soon as you start working in VR. So, I mean, this is so much fun. At this point, I've moved on to working with the candles. This time switching to the spherical brush instead, melting wax all over the place. I alternate between placing down new wax, cutting some away, and also doing a lot of smoothing. In Kodon, you can either use these tools individually or simply by holding down a couple of modify buttons on the left controller. Once the throne and candles are done, I'm exporting them before hopping over to Blender. And small hiccup here. It looks like something went wrong during the export or import. Well, turns out that the candles are fine though, so I get started on those before having a look at what went awry with the thrones model. First, I decimate the poly count on the model a bit in order to make it manageable. Then I do some auto unwraps, and I apologize in advance for all the horrific UV work you'll see in this video. Over in Substance Painter, I bake all the default maps before throwing on a wax material. This is by far the simplest texture job for this project. Most of the work will be done by a subsurface scattering shader together with individual point lights. And then I'm back in Blender. Here I hook up all the PBR metal rough textures to the standard material in Blender. Make sure to set everything besides the standard map to non-color and hook up the normal map through a normal map node. So, time to deal with the throne. I've ran into similar issues in the past, so my first guess is that jumping back into Kodon and doing a bit of smoothing might help. And sure enough, mostly fine now. Still a couple of small issues that I need to fix by hand, but it's dealt with easily enough. The music that you can hear in the background is actually made by an old friend of mine. I'll put some sort of link in the description if you want to check out some of his other stuff. I also realized that there are some hollow spaces inside the model, which I go in and remove. Considering that I'm a bit short on time and this project was only ever meant for render work, not say a real-time game or something of that sort, I'm simply compensating for the awful UV maps with larger textures instead. This throne mod is actually my second version, so I've already worked out a smart material for it beforehand. I simply slap that on and we are good. The material itself is a simple combination of different smart materials and smart masks that produce this nice worn metal look. Make sure that you set the normal export to use the OpenGL RGB type when exporting textures for Blender's PBR materials. I also use a mix RGB node in order to overlay the ambient occlusion map with the darken setting in order to get a bit more contrast into the base texture. And back in Kodon. It's finally time to get started on the actual character. By now you know pretty much what I'm doing, so I'll just let you enjoy the music for a while. By now I'm starting to get the general outline of the character in place, so it's time to tackle one of the areas that I've been pushing off for a while, the hands. This is always one of the rougher parts to get right, and well, this is the edited sped up version. In actuality, I ended up redoing them a couple of times before I found something that I was pretty happy with. With that in place, time to move on to the outfit. I simply do this by creating a second volume and start working with it and try to fit it sort of onto the shape of the character. When I'm happy with the overall look of the character, I go in for a detail pass and start to make sure that all the little creases and bumps and details and so on get worked into the shape of the clothes and the hair and the mask and so on. And that's the character in place. Now I just need to get a whole lot of pumpkins done. This is a Halloween themed project after all. Great thing about working, one of the great things about working like this in VR is that it's so fast. It takes hardly any time to get these models done comparatively to working in 2D. And it allows me to do things like I actually built all the pumpkins complete from the beginning. I added all the little bumps and textures and everything around the whole pumpkin. So that once it was time to start carving, I could simply just grab the pumpkin and look around it and figure out which angle I wanted to start from, which side I wanted to put in the face and so on. And this is so much fun. It's essentially pumpkin carving, pretty much like you do for real, but instead with the index ones and so on. And there we are. Now I just need to do the same thing a bunch of times. It's the same thing with the pumpkin material here. I already developed it earlier when I first started trying out working with these pumpkins and so on. So I just need to take that, slap it on, do a couple of masks, and I'm good to go. The stone floor was probably the biggest model I actually made. Maybe not in complexity, but certainly in the number of vertices. This thing actually had me dropping frames a bit when I was working in Kodon. But very easy to do. Besides that, you just use the square brush and start painting bricks. And more terrible UV unwrapping for the character. And with the mapping done, it's time to start working on the actual textures. This was by far the most complex of the texture jobs, and sadly I only ended up capturing the first pass on video. But you can at least see how I'm dividing the model into different areas, adding materials, experimenting with colors, patterns, and so on. After that, I just kept going back and forth between Substance Painter and Blender, trying different things to see what works, reworking the pattern on the shirt, etc. Until I find a look that I think renders nicely in Blender and works well with the overall composition. Here I'm just taking the base color texture and putting it in Photoshop and reworking it to black and white with the skin areas brighter to get a sort of rough subsurface scattering map that I can use for my model. And here we have the final texture map in Substance Painter. This is what I ended up using for the final renders in Blender. And here it is, all the geometry in place, everything composed in Blender, and the lights are hidden right now because it's such a mess. But this is all sculpted in virtual reality, and I love it. It's so much fun. I'll probably gonna end up using this pipeline for a lot of more projects, hopefully. So with that done, all that's left is getting the final render out there. And again, sped up. I think in the end it takes roughly 10 minutes to do one of these renders. So, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll be making more of these at some point. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them below.